When you think of Philippine earthquakes, you probably think of the trenches. The Manila Trench, the Cotabato Trench, the East Luzon Trench, all of them offshore, beneath the ocean, threatening tsunamis. But there's another earthquake threat that doesn't get enough attention. And this one doesn't hide underwater. It runs through the middle of the Philippines, through mountains, cities, and farmland. From Northern Luzon all the way down to Southern Mindanao. It's called the Philippine Fault System, a 200-kilometer network of active fault lines that cuts through the entire archipelago like a scar across the country. And it's responsible for the deadliest earthquakes in recent Philippine history. If the offshore trenches threaten tsunamis, the Philippine Fault threatens something more immediate: direct ground shaking beneath some of the most populated areas in the Philippines. This is the fault line most Filipinos don't know about. But it's been killing people for centuries, and it will strike again. The Philippine Fault System is not a single fault. It's a complex network of interconnected fault lines running roughly north to south through the Philippines. It starts in northern Luzon near Apari, cutting through the Cordillera mountain range. It continues south through central Luzon, passing dangerously close to Metro Manila. This segment is the Marikina Valley Fault, which we've covered in another video. From there, it extends through southern Luzon, through Quezon Province, and the Bondok Peninsula. It crosses into the Visayas through Masbate and Leyte, and it continues down through Mindanao, running through Agusan, Davao, and ending near Davao Gulf. In total, the Philippine Fault System stretches about 1 to 200 kilometers. That's roughly the distance from Manila to Singapore, or the length of California's San Andreas Fault, one of the most famous fault systems in the world. And just like the San Andreas Fault, the Philippine Fault is active, very active, and it runs through densely populated areas. Unlike the offshore trenches, which are subduction zones where tectonic plates collide and one dives beneath the other, the Philippine Fault is a strike-slip fault. This means the two sides of the fault are sliding horizontally past each other. Think of it like two massive blocks of earth grinding alongside one another. They're locked together by friction. Pressure builds over decades or centuries. Then suddenly, catastrophically, they slip. That slip releases all the built-up energy as an earthquake. Strike-slip faults don't usually generate tsunamis because they don't displace large amounts of water vertically. But they cause intense ground shaking right at the surface. And when the fault runs through cities, towns, and villages, which the Philippine Fault does in dozens of locations, the damage is direct and devastating. The Philippine Fault System has been responsible for some of the deadliest earthquakes in recent Philippine history. July 16, 1990, 4:26 p.m., central Luzon. A magnitude 7.7 earthquake strikes along a segment of the Philippine Fault. The epicenter is near Rizal, Nueva Ecija, but the strongest shaking hits Baguio City in the Cordillera Mountains. The city is devastated. The Hyatt Terraces Hotel collapses, pancaking floor by floor. Hundreds are trapped inside. Other buildings crumble. Roads are destroyed. Landslides bury entire communities in the mountains. By the time the dust settles, over 1,600 people are dead. Thousands more are injured. Central Luzon's infrastructure is crippled. It takes years to rebuild. The 1990 Luzon earthquake was a wake-up call. It proved that the Philippine Fault could produce magnitude 7.0 plus earthquakes capable of killing thousands. October 15, 2013, 8:12 a.m. Bohol. A magnitude 7.2 earthquake strikes along the Philippine Fault's extension through the Visayas. The shaking is violent. Buildings collapse across Bohol and Cebu. Historic Spanish-era churches, some over 400 years old, crumble to rubble. The Baclayon Church, the Lobok Church, the Mariboyoc Church, all destroyed or severely damaged. Roads crack open. Bridges collapse. Power and water are cut off across the region. Over 200 people are killed. Thousands are left homeless. The Bohol earthquake showed that the Philippine Fault doesn't just threaten Luzon. The Visayas sits directly on the fault system, and the fault is just as deadly there. February 10, 2017, 10:03 p.m., Surigao City, Mindanao. A magnitude 6.7 earthquake strikes along the Mindanao segment of the Philippine Fault. Buildings collapse. The city's airport is damaged. Roads buckle. Power lines fall. Surigao City is plunged into darkness. While the death toll is lower than 1990 or 2013, partly because it hit at night when fewer people were in vulnerable buildings, the damage is extensive. The city is without power for days. Infrastructure takes months to repair. The Surigao earthquake proved that even the southern segments of the Philippine Fault are active. Mindanao is not safe from this threat. 3 major earthquakes, 3 different regions, Luzon, Visayas, Mindanao, all caused by the same fault system. The Philippine Fault doesn't discriminate. It runs through the entire country, and every segment is capable of producing deadly earthquakes. So which cities are most at risk? In Luzon, Baguio and the Cordillera region already experienced devastation in 1990, but the fault also passes near Metro Manila via the Marikina Valley Fault, threatening 13 million people. Southern Luzon cities in Quezon Province also sit near active segments. In Visayas, Bohol and Leyte have experienced recent earthquakes, but the fault also runs through Masbate and threatens eastern Visayas cities that haven't seen major activity in decades, meaning pressure could be building. In Mindanao, Surigao was hit in 2017, but the fault extends through Agusan del Norte, Davao Oriental, and other provinces. Davao City, one of the largest cities in the Philippines, sits near the southern terminus of the fault. Dozens of cities, millions of people, all living on or near an active fault system that has proven it can kill. Here's what makes the Philippine Fault particularly dangerous. It's not offshore like the trenches. When the Manila Trench or Cotabato Trench ruptures, the earthquake happens beneath the ocean. Coastal areas get 10 to 30 minutes of tsunami warning time. Not much, but something. When the Philippine Fault ruptures, there's no warning. The earthquake is right beneath your feet. Buildings start collapsing within seconds. Roads split open immediately. Landslides bury communities before anyone can react. For most Filipinos living in the interior of the country, away from coastlines, the Philippine Fault is a greater threat than any offshore trench. Geologists estimate that different segments of the Philippine Fault rupture on different timescales. Some segments might produce major earthquakes every 200-300 years. Others might wait 400-600 years. The problem is that we don't have detailed seismic records going back far enough to know exactly when each segment last moved. We know about 1990, 2013, and 2017 because they happened recently. But what about earlier centuries? Historical records are incomplete. We have accounts of earthquakes from Spanish colonial times, but many went undocumented or were poorly recorded. What we do know is that the Philippine Fault is active right now. Pressure is building along multiple segments. PHIVOLCS monitors seismic activity constantly, detecting smaller earthquakes that indicate the fault is stressed. Which segment will rupture next? Nobody knows. It could be a segment that hasn't moved in 300 years. Or it could be a segment that just experienced an earthquake and is now moving again. Earthquake prediction is not possible. We can assess risk, but we cannot predict exact timing. PHIVOLCS has mapped the entire Philippine Fault system. They know where it runs. They know which areas are most vulnerable. They've conducted studies. They've issued warnings. But the reality is that most Filipinos don't even know the fault exists. Ask someone in Manila about earthquake threats, and they'll mention the big one, or the trenches. But the Philippine Fault? Most haven't heard of it. That needs to change. The Philippine Fault System is a 1,200-kilometer network of active fault lines running through Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. It's caused 3 major deadly earthquakes in the past 35 years. 1990 Luzon, 1,600 dead, 2013 Bohol, 200 dead, and 2017 Surigao. It runs through or near dozens of major cities. It threatens millions of Filipinos, and it's more immediate than offshore trenches because the shaking happens directly beneath land. Every region of the Philippines is vulnerable. Northern Luzon has the Cordillera segment. Central Luzon has the Marikina Valley Fault. Southern Luzon has active segments in Quezon. The Visayas has the Bohol Leyte segment. Mindanao has the Surigao Davao segment. This isn't a regional threat. It's a national threat. And the only defense is preparation. Earthquake-resistant buildings, emergency supplies, family plans, public education. Because the Philippine Fault will strike again. Not if, when. Which segment do you live near? Luzon? Visayas? Mindanao? Let me know in the comments. And if you want more videos covering every Philippine earthquake threat, subscribe and hit the notification bell. Because the Philippine Fault connects the entire country, geologically and in shared risk. We're all vulnerable. We all need to be prepared.